I think it was really interesting for what I shared and he shared, and it kind of goes back to share that tribes are as diverse and as artists are as diverse as tribal members and tribal nations. It was really nice because I've never done fellowships, never got any grants. I've always kind of been in the right place at the right time, and I've traveled on my own doing that. But I thought what he had to share was very interesting, and it was nice that he concluded by highlighting some young artists that are up and coming, because I have two sons that paint with me in my gallery, and we collaborate in a number of different shows, and everything that I've shared with them, it comes back to get me sometimes. They're like, gee, Dad, that's all you can do? That's it? Come on. So they'll beat me up with my own words. But if you have any questions, now's a good time. We kind of interact. If you have something about me or, both of us, they can mix and match. It doesn't matter. We're pretty open.
This is about your process. I'm wondering on your beading, do you treat the canvas first, do the beading, and then go back and paint straight?
Well, I paint pretty much it almost maybe 75%. Then I beat it, or my wife will beat it, and then I'll come back and I'll finish it. I'll execute it from there. Yeah, and I don't do anything else. Go ahead.
What about that piece of art you said encouraged you to then want to show your art publicly or share it with them? What was it about that encouraged that?
Thanks for that question. Because my practice was really private, I wasn't sharing it that way. I had that freedom. After many years of doing certain pieces, you like it, you don't like it, the color, the rhythm, the energy. But that particular one, I was actually sitting in my aunt's living room in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. I was visiting her, and I was bringing my sketchbooks and pens and things. And at that moment, it really spoke to me. The message from the work was saying, okay, you're ready now. The rhythm or the tempo or the color, whatever it was at that point, that particular piece was the one that said, okay, now it's time. If you're ready, we're ready to go.
Interesting.
Thank you.
What are ways to free up yourself to let that expression come through rather than following the traditional rules?
Well, for me, I wasn't classically trained or had a school to overcome in the sense of artwork. I had the good fortune of getting fellowships to go to Japan and really kind of be a spectator and then somewhat practitioner of their artwork and martial arts and tea ceremony and looking at their aesthetic and their gardens and things like that. And so when I decided to start making art, I put a few rules on it. And one was not to be an exercise in perfectionism, because I'd done that a lot of my life, right? We get over excited or focused on some project and we work it too much. Another aspect I put a rule on was if I make a mistake or drop it or smear it or get dirt on it, let it be, that's where it's going, so don't try and stop it. And that was really, the beginning of the process really encouraged me just to write whatever was going on, and so that was a big part of it was process. You just take a piece of paper or whatever you have and a pencil or a pen and you just go. And maybe you have a thought or intention or maybe you don't. But you see where the movement, the color, the stroke, or the line takes you. And that's why I like to have sketchbooks around that way. You're not trying to find it or you look for a clean page. It's available that way. When you have that energy, you can go. And a lot of times, in my process, I'll do several pieces at once, one after the other. And you can look at it. If you see the whole sequence, you can see the energy kind of build, peak, and then end. And you kind of know you're done for that session. And maybe you take a break for a few days or whatever, and then go back to something else. So that's been part of my process, helped me kind of free that up. And then not having the tension of having to show it or sell it or be critiqued or these types of things. Because, trained artists, they have good hearts and intentions, but they go back to that critique class. And, well, I think you're using too much black and these types of things. And that really wasn't, on my mind of if I should use color that invoked black or actually use black, these types of trainings that I didn't have to deal with mentally.
I have a question.
Yes.
Working in large format painting, has that changed your attitude or your expectations in terms of self-criticism or feedback from others?
It's something that I used to share a little bit with really mature artists in Santa Fe, New Mexico. They'd look at my work and they'd have really great critiques like, well, you need to work on a bigger space, right? Nothing about color or line or texture. And so over the years, I've been getting bigger and bigger because my hand tends to do this, right? And it doesn't work for small pieces of paper. And so what I was doing in Vermont, I was working with ink on paper and seeing where that took me. Then I took a particular ink and made that 6 foot by 6 foot painting. And to me, it was really freeing because now I can use my whole body and I can move and stand up and down. It's almost like a workout. But it's a lot of fun, and so I'm looking forward to getting another space that big to continue to do more pieces like that.
So that 6 foot by 6 foot piece of art, where is that now?
It's actually rolled up at my house right now. So
You're looking for a big frame. Right?
Potentially, but it was literally the first one I'd ever done of that particular size. So it was a learning process of the material, the paint. If I could do that big of a size, and so I'm getting ready to have another studio in Santa Fe that will accommodate big paintings like that. So I'll do more and see where it goes. But it's nice to your point, if it's not framed already, I don't have to worry about storage too bad. I can just do a bunch of them, and then when the time's right, I can get them out and then have them framed.
Is the process as fulfilling as the finished piece?
Not all the time. Sometimes the process is everything, and sometimes the finished product surprises me, because my approach is very different. I think that I kind of approach it more in a, maybe intellectual is the wrong word, but I kind of think of using the left and right brain, not only the creative side but the intellectual side as well. And I think that sometimes it helps me to question myself, just saying, okay, is this all you're doing? What do you really want to do? For me, I change it. I've done a series of nudes, and I came back from London. I had this series of nudes, and I told my collector I have these series of nudes, and he goes, "Are they Indian nudes?" And I'm like, "Come on, would you tell Jimi Hendrix or those black notes?" I was just like, so I do mix it up, and I think that I studied the human figure, and it was really nice to do this series and then bring it back to the States. I've been fortunate to be able to do artwork outside the country and then bring it home. Yeah, I think the process and the product, they have their own purpose in the different ways. You have any questions about Indians that you've been afraid to ask?
We'll try and be gentle.
Do you, first of all, as a teacher, what did you teach?
I taught art history, humanities.
Art history?
Yeah, painting, drawing, art history. I have a minor in English. I taught creative writing. My last day job was Native Peoples Magazine. I was editorial advisor for 2 years.
Is that still in existence?
It is, but it's Gary Avery, who's really was the founder. He passed away a few years back, and it got a little weak after that. Mm-hmm. And I had a tough time with it because it was kind of the Ebony magazine of the Indian world, and because I wanted to write stories about. There was a guy in North Dakota that he was an alcoholic, and he started singing and changed his whole life, singing at the powwow drum. He ended up becoming a principal. Earl Bullhead, and he had a great story, and I wrote the story, and he goes, maybe we shouldn't have so many negative stories. I'm like, this is what really Indian country's about. This guy healed himself through the drum, went back to school, got a master's degree in education, and it turned out that his great-grandfather killed Sitting Bull. He was that police that killed Sitting Bull, so his family was always hated. So he didn't know why he went to alcohol, but he kind of researched his own family and realized it came from that pain.
Do you alternate between writing and painting, or how do you?
You know what? Working with Native Peoples Magazine, it was so discouraging fixing up other people's work. Like someone would send me a paper on like Taos Blue Lake, and I'm like, this is a term paper, dude. It's not a magazine article. So then you hurt people's feelings. They're like, oh, I see. So when you're editing people's work, I think about time right now. I'd really like to write a screenplay. And pretty much what my own life, being urban, traveling throughout the United States, meeting different people from different tribes, being taken in and adopted by other people from Zuni to South Dakota. So, I hope I answered your question.
I don't quite know how to express this, but the two of you sitting there are such a composition. And you're both Indians, and I was struck when you stood up that you each had the same kind of a hat on. And then the one mentioned the black and the white, and you look like, I guess, most people's conception of Indian and now a very progressive, I don't know how to explain
Well, I can't
it.
grow a beard or else.
I think you've done excellent presentations, and I would love to just take a picture of the two of you sitting there.
Well, actually, it was planned out. We emailed each other earlier and asked, what color hat are you going to wear? No, that's not true, but it sounds good.
Yeah, because he has a white coat or a lighter coat, you have
Yeah.
a darker coat. I mean, it's very
Contrast.
good composition. Yes.
Poster child for Indian country.
Poster
Right?
child.
There you go. Whether we like it or not.
Do you find that it's Native American artists, do you feel it, you mainstream with other artists, or is there this conception that you guys produce Indian art? You had made the comment that your collector had said, where are the Indian nudes?
Right, right.
Almost as if they would have to be.
Right. It's like anything that we paint. If I paint a tree, they're going to say, oh, is that an Indian tree? You know what I mean? That's an Indian sunset. So, the Santa Fe is the only place I've been up on the rooftop in La Fonda, and the sun's going down, and all these people, and I'm like, the sun goes down every day here. As the creator, it's not a performance. You clap when you see the sun go down at home. I don't know. It was just, I'd never seen that. And, I thought that was a little odd to me.
I think that's a great question. It's something I've thought a lot about. I exhibited in the Santa Fe Indian Market for the last 3 years, probably will be this coming August. And one of the things I think is the artists, whatever they make and show in Indian Market or those types of venues, that's great. They feed their families and they send their kids to school, and that's perfect. But one of the things that I wanted to show by showing in those types of venues was something that was maybe different or unexpected or kind of threw people off or didn't know what to think. And so that strategy has been great for sales, but I think it's been great to get the dialogue going and the conversation going and for other people to see something different. So I'm really happy with what it's done so far.
I wish this had been videotaped, maybe it was, because we have relatives, back east, and they have no concept of New Mexico. The 8 northern pueblos are the excellent examples you guys are.
Yeah, we know. I think we both traveled to the east and the Midwest, Central America. I think for us is that there's conscious people all over. And if all the conscious people were in one place, I don't know, maybe they'd put a bomb on us and get rid of us because we're the thinkers. And the nice thing is that consciousness doesn't come in any one color.
Right.
And like when you think of just the environment alone of smog and the carbon in the air, the earth takes care of the carbon naturally. And all it has to do is that where they have the cattle, they got to move the cattle someplace else for 10 years. And the carbon will go into the earth. I mean, the thing, it's real basic, but modern man, he doesn't, they don't know how to holistic farm. They want many cows as they can because they got to, McDonald's needs hamburgers, so we got to pound them out here. But I think for us is that we've always done things in, let your time, you need to let your body heal. You need I think after 7 years of doing something, even take a break, maybe do drawing for a while. I work with clay, I do jewelry, I do silkscreen. And I work in a lot of different mediums, and I think writing's another one. You're using another part of the brain that the artist, as the painter, doesn't really use.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question on a symbol that was used a couple of times. It's the swastika. It seems to be very repugnant to a lot of people and throughout the world. Something that I don't feel can ever be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
Why is this even being used?
It's a symbol that's still used all over the world by hundreds of millions of people in Asia, Native Americans, Hopis, and so that's the point that you feel that it can never come back again in mainstream. Well, maybe not, but I feel that it was never used by our cultures or our brothers and sisters' cultures for that intent, and that's what I'm trying to say was maybe something that other people think can never be reused. Maybe we can look at something where it can be used for the purpose it was intended for, which is for healing.
Apropos of this gentleman's question, I always understood that the swastika was backwards.
Yeah.
Was actually a different composition than this one.
Yeah, it's the Hopis did it differently. and the one that was used in Germany was kind of the flip side, the swastika. You see in some of the old Navajo weavings, you find that symbol. It's a symbol of the four directions, the four directions, the four powers of the world.
What are the four powers of the world?
The four directions: north, south, east, west.
Okay.
The four seasons too comes in four.
The benefits of knowing this little piece of information was tremendous, because I went to a yard sale once and bought a Navajo rug that's like 10 feet long and 4 feet wide, and nobody wanted it, so I got it for $25 because they thought it was swastika. Nobody would buy it.
Well, I can give you 50 for it today if you want.
I'll give you 60.
But you got to remember one thing too, is that when people do see that, you got to remember what happened in history. There was a nation of a people that were obliterated. And, you know, for us, our symbols have been taken and used and misused a lot. Kitsch, you go through Gallup, New Mexico, they use native symbols, and, you know, you find it on coffee cups, you find it on, you know, napkins, you find it on candle holders. And I think that's one of the things, that native symbols have really been used and misused in this country and in the world.
I was just curious, what do you two attribute your success to when you see and hear so much tragedy in the papers about education today? You certainly do not fit the molds of, you know, past history of Indian children being educated.
You know, I told them that earlier when this is the first time we've met. It's not like we really social media and we text each other all the time. So I told them, you know what, for me as a California Indian, Oklahoma, the only natives in the whole United States are very similar to California Indians, is that we're kind of exposed urban, we're exposed to education, we're exposed to family that actually cares sometimes. But you know, when you have a mom and dad that are alcoholics, and you know, you don't go home and say, hey, could you stop fighting so I can do my homework? So when I was teaching, I would tell teachers, you know what, before you really get on this kid's on top of him, why don't you find out what his home life is like? It's hard to go study when there's fighting at the house and there's ugliness, because you know what, we live in a bad time, and it has nothing to do with just Indian people. You know, education in our country has really failed. We have really failed to educate our youth today. And one of the things that I find is that education doesn't happen in the classroom. So we need to have we have to re-examine the whole curriculum of our early schools all the way to today. And that's why they have the outlet schools. They're getting private money. They're getting money to, people would rather send their kids to a private school. And that's not always necessarily the answer either, because not everyone has money to send their kids to a private school. So yeah, I think both of us I think our experiences have had impact on us to make us the men that we are today. And I like to think that it's more my grandmother who taught me how to be a man.
For my piece, it really was around the influence of my mother. And she was valedictorian of a BIA school in Oklahoma called Sequoia. And she told me stories about where they punish her for speaking Cherokee language and the other students for speaking Cherokee, which Tahlequah was the home of the Cherokee Nation. That's where the headquarters and the chief and the council meet and convene, and we have our ceremonies and things like that. So, you know, in the school is literally in walking distance from the tribal council chambers. And so she was urbanized, to your point, and she knew that if I was going to have a chance in the modern world, that I needed to have a good education. And so from the time I was a little boy, she would talk to me when I was 9. Now, when you get to college, it's going to be different than you're experiencing now, this gobbledygook you're hearing. And I didn't understand, what's she talking about? I'm 9. I'm not going to college for like 10, 11 years. What do you mean? And because of that reinforcement and that encouragement, that's the way I started thinking about it. And then when I got older, I could definitely see and understand what she was talking about. That I grew up in Oklahoma, which is, as probably many of you know, it's very conservative, to say the least, right? They're the ones that are trying to make it easier to get guns, not harder to get guns currently, right? And so you grow up in that environment, and you think, yeah, I need to go and see other parts of the world, and really that's going to be made through education and college. And I was fortunate enough to get a fellowship to go to graduate school, get me to DC and get me to Japan. But I was also had these notions as a young person to travel to different countries and get pushback, particularly from my freshman peers in undergrad. Well, why are you trying to study Japanese, Well, I'm trying to do something different. It's okay if you don't understand it, but you don't have to dog me or talk bad about me because I'm trying to do something different. But that's also built into the structure in some of the contemporary culture too, is you got to kind of fall in line with working at the tribe or other things that you're obligated to do. The other thing that released me was, unfortunately, both my parents died when I was a teenager, and so it kind of put me in the world by myself. And at the time I had to make a decision, am I going to take this path of self-destruction, or am I going to take this path of something else and seeing what's possible and what other Native Americans haven't done, like go to graduate school in Japan. And I didn't think it was possible. I was scared to death every step of the way. But each month and each day I would learn a little bit more and make a little bit more progress, and was able to maintain and continue on to the next stage. And so through that, that also helped me get to do some of these achievements or go to these places. But one of the things that was mentioned, since I've got your attention, one of the nonprofits I work with here in Santa Fe is called Gerard's House. And that's one thing I didn't have as a kid, dealing with this grief I was just mentioning. And what we do is we work with 3-year-olds to 20-year-olds to help them process their grief. We've been around since 1997. It's a great organization, but not many people have heard of us unless you need our services. The schools have, the funeral homes have. And we work with hundreds of kids a year. And primarily our technique and practice is through art and self-expression, and creating a safe place for these children to express their grief and be heard. A lot of times children don't have any control, can't be heard. And as Americans or human beings, sometimes we think, well, it's been a year, aren't you over it yet? Well, it could be 10 or 20 years and you're still not over it yet. And that's what we tell the children, it's okay to be happy and sad on the same day. So if you haven't heard about Gerard's House, please check it out.
One of the things that we have really in common is what we both traveled. And like most of you know, that travel gives you some kind of insight that you don't get if you stay in one place. You go places, you meet different people, you get different conversations, and you start to be, you start empathizing with people of the world, because we're all just one people on one planet. The thing that always amazed me as a kid when I'd read science fiction, the Martians were always one people. It wasn't like the Martians in the north or the dark Martians. Martians were all one people, and I was a kid. I was a strange little kid, and I was like, well, why can't we just be Earthlings? Why can't we be citizens of the planet? So if there's any good questions, really don't hesitate. I know you're probably thinking like, oh, maybe I don't want to raise my hand. But if I can't answer it, he will. How's that?
So besides here in the What's New in New exhibit, where can we find your work?
I have a gallery at 201 East Palace, right on the side of Cathedral Park. I'm right there in the corner. I represent myself, my 2 sons, and my wife. It's a family gallery. And it's very mixed media, from silkscreen to jewelry. We're just making art. And like I said, my 2 boys and my wife, we sit down and everyone takes time to work, and we all run the gallery together. So definitely come to the gallery and check it out. I'm painting really large. I have a studio at home where the average painting at home is maybe 6 feet by 10 feet. And I just sold a piece to the Boston Fine Arts Museum last summer that was maybe 6 feet by 12 feet. So those paintings, to me, where you want to be as an artist, a gallery is kind of like a bar gig for a musician. Where the musician really wants to be, he wants to open for concerts. Just to do another gallery show and a sellout show, I can do that myself. But where you really want to be in the art world is you want to do museum exhibitions. You want to do installations. It takes you to another level because, first of all, thousands of people get to see your work. Sometimes it's sad. I do this great painting, and this guy has 5 houses, and now it's hidden upstate in Connecticut, and the house that he sees only once in a while. And I like the idea of having more public pieces, and I paint really large for that reason, is because it's not going to fit above their couch. All right.
For me, I don't have a gallery yet, and I'm setting up a studio now. So unfortunately, you can't see the work, but it is outside in the current gallery here. But temporarily, you can check it out on the web, www.rosschaney.com.
And you'll be at Indian Market?
Definitely be at Indian Market this coming August. Please come and check that out.
I wanted to just ask both of you about your process of going from
you know, if you always made art and had a day job, about what prompted you to then kind of make art your focus?
What I would do is that art was a living part of me. And when I taught, I would come home and I would still paint for 4 hours. When I worked that day job, I would still come home and work 4 hours. Because I've always been, to me, that's, if you're waiting for inspiration, to me, that's for an amateur. You can't wait for inspiration. You just create it. Just let it happen. It'll flow. It'll happen. You just got to push yourself to do it. But if you're sitting around like, oh, I can't paint today, you know, and I better watch TV after work today. And then, you know, I think that I always worked. Because when I worked, it was like a fresh canvas was exciting. It was like, it was a way to let that day job go. And I always made a thing in my home when I taught. I only had like 10 minutes to complain about the day. After 10 minutes, my wife would go, okay, 10 minutes is up. And then I let stuff go where, you know, I would hear teachers in the teacher's lounge going months about this one student. I'm like, let it go. I mean, come on. I think that I seen early on teachers that were ready to retire and checking their pulse between classes. And I'm like, I don't want to fossil like this. I'm not going to fossil in this lounge. So I think just having, you know, personal motivation, that's really the key to it. You know, you just got to get up and do it. No one's going to make you. And actually, the world don't care if Stan doesn't get up tomorrow and do a new painting. So I do it for myself. And, hey, if I have a chance to share it, I do.
For me, it goes back to what I was saying before about my private practice and allowing myself to make mistakes or be ugly or off-sided or whatever it was that I would critique it. I was very artistic as a kid in art class and things like that. I really enjoyed it. But I grew up in the TV era of Reaganomics and, you know, get a real job and go get an MBA and go work for a big company. And so I really didn't do a lot of art after I left Japan. But then when I came here, I'd gone through that right brain spreadsheet type world. And I said, you know, I want to use my left brain more and be creative and just allow myself to do that. But it was tough because you think, oh, I got to make a masterpiece on this piece of paper, otherwise, you know, I suck. So, so that's the thing you got to do is challenge yourself to, you know, make a squiggle and flip the page and be okay with it, so you can go on and really, you know, do what you want to do and get past that built-up wall, whether it's mental or whatever it is.
At what point did you also move into film?
I started talking to my friend about it about 10 years ago. Because they were in the industry, so, you know, it's accessible at that point. Because back then it was so labor-intensive, cost-intensive, all these things, and now it's so great. In the last couple of years, we've got these crowdfunding devices called Kickstarter and Indiegogo, where I just looked on it yesterday. People are raising $1 million on crowdfunding for theater projects and prototyping and film, and it didn't exist up until 3 or 4 years ago. So now it's much more accessible to get talented folks together and to get some funding to do these projects. And it's just another way of storytelling and expressing yourself. And like he said, you know, not only thousands, but millions of people can see it now because it's broadcast globally.
It's true.
Well, how did both of you end up in Santa Fe?
Well, I don't know how both of us did, but I know how I did. I was teaching, finishing my master's at Arizona State University, teaching part-time there. And Elaine Horowitz, I wanted to show with her. And I did, I had sheets of money, maybe about 30 sheets of money of paintings, and they weren't framed. And I had a nice portfolio, but I just cut cardboard and I just sewed it together and I brought this portfolio in. And Elaine was kind of like, I don't know, can you get them framed? I'm like, no, I'm in graduate school. I'm so broke. No, I have 2 kids. So she says, okay, leave them. Well, this is maybe 2 months before Indian Market. So Indian Market, I come in, I'm looking. I'm like, okay, where's my paintings? She didn't frame them. Then she comes, Elaine Horowitz comes running down, Stanley. And now I'm like, she better give me the time of the day when I came here a couple of months ago. I'll try. She sold all of them unframed. And she gives me this check, and I'm like, she goes, what's wrong? I'm like, I'm telling all these people, this is my big debut for Indian Market. I'm at the Elaine Horowitz Gallery, and you have nothing but a check? What am I going to do with that? I'm going to do with that? Come on, you know, we had Warhols on one wall, and, you know, I thought Stan Natchez was going to be over here, wrong. You know, and then it was kind of funny because when I painted on currency, I wanted to kind of play on making fun of the commercial Indian art and what they get trapped into doing to feed their families and to put their kids through school. And it's so funny because I had the sellout show, and you know, I kind of became what I made fun of. You know, and I had this big check now. It's like, oh, I better hide my Mercedes in the back so people can drive Benz. All true. But yeah, I think that, you know, we come here for different reasons. I came here because I knew that Santa Fe is only number 2 to the art world to New York. It's only second in the whole country. So people come from all over the world. And you know what? Santa Fe is not all Indian art. You go up Canyon Road and you see Russian art, and you see Japanese art and abstract art. And, you know, I think that, you know, there's room for everybody here. And I think there's something nice here. I grew up in Los Angeles, and we had a house in Arizona. I sold it right before the market crashed. And when we moved here, you know, Santa Fe's a village. And when people complain about traffic on Cerrillos Road, I'm like, that's an off-ramp at home. Dude, are you worried about traffic on Cerrillos Road? Are you kidding me? Come on. So, I love it. I think my wife's from Taos, and it's just enough distance away from the in-laws that that they're not always there. No, I love my family. My mother-in-law is the best, too. That's the honest truth.
Well, I was born and raised in Oklahoma. I spent most of my, when I was a little boy on the Osage Reservation. That's where my grandfather on my mother's side was from. And some of you may know the history of Santa Fe. It used to be called the Osage Trail. That followed the buffalo herds to Santa Fe, and we have a street here named Osage Street. And so as a little boy, I'd come out here with my grandparents, my grandfather, and it was the first racetrack I went to, Santa Fe Downs, you know. Gambling experience, good for children, right? And I came out here almost every year for about 10 or so years, and then when I went to graduate school in Japan and worked on the East Coast, I took a break. I didn't come back to the Southwest. But I was really fortunate. Around 1999, I was on the East Coast, and I was doing some work with nonprofits, and one of them was based in Santa Fe. And I met some really great folks that are from here, are natives and locals from Santa Fe. And through that nonprofit, was offered a job to come out here to switch from corporate work to nonprofit work. And that was really my life's dream and goal, was to take that kind of skill set and bring it back to native and local communities and get it out of the big city. And so I did that in 2002. And then the creativity and the community here, you know, it was really inspiring to continue to make the work and then eventually to show it. Thank you.
Well, I think that's pretty much it. And I have a few pieces you can come up and look at. And if you have any questions about them, I just want to share the beadwork. And I'm sure Don wants to control right now the conclusion.
I just want to thank again Stan